Good morning, everybody. This is the February 8th meeting of the Planning, Research and Development Committee and the Land Conservation Committee. So with that, I'll call the meeting to order. I can't see my screen. I think everybody's here. Is that correct? I'm going to say it is. So I think we do have a quorum. So next would be approval of the minutes from the January 25th meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move approval of those minutes.
Supervisor Morehouse, thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second it, Mike.
Supervisor Kinnear seconds. Any discussion, additions, corrections? Okay, all in favor of approval, say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Minutes are approved. And we do have at least one public comment that I think Tom is going to read.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. This is a public comment that we received through email. It came in from Catherine Stahl on Sunday, February 6th at 10:32 p.m. Hello. Please include the following in the public comments at the February 8th PR&D Committee meeting. It is disappointing that PR&D has dismissed the ad hoc groundwater advisory council recommendation to develop a water resources council. It is a bit surprising as the Dunn County Land and Water Resource Management Plan for 2017 to 2026 also listed a medium priority objective to develop a groundwater council composed of stakeholders to guide groundwater monitoring and research in the county. Such a council would have been an excellent way, although admittedly not without challenges, to broaden the outreach and coalesce action across Dunn County. You are doing an excellent job of encouraging action among the ag operators, and public health does an excellent job addressing well water testing and quality in public venues. What about the rest of us? Given the no-go status of a Water Resources Council, please consider still a different model listed as follows. PR&D and public health committees adopt specific goals toward water quality. The Dunn County Land and Water Resource Management Plan for 2017 to 2026 states the goal, among others, is to protect groundwater quantity and quality. That goal is so general and obvious, it offers little meaning and direction. It is the county's goal. Is the county's goal to have no more than 0%, 10% contaminated wells, or a reduction of 20% current contaminated wells, or across all townships? Is the plan to start with townships with known recent well testing data? Is the goal to reduce the upward trend of nitrate levels? Is the county trying to achieve 0 PFA contaminated wells? What is the county trying to achieve? What do you want Dunn County programs and citizens to accomplish? As of late, PR&D has been reviewing monthly the ad hoc groundwater recommendations, which I appreciate. May I suggest that you regularly review the goals and objectives you have previously adopted relative to water quality, as well as hopefully more specific goals you would set. In looking at the objectives listed under the Protect Groundwater Quantity and Quality on the 2017 to 2026 plan, it's not clear if they have been achieved. It is clear, however, that making changes in water quality is usually a long-term process, but how do you know if your efforts are working toward the goal of protecting groundwater quantity and quality? As an example of confusing goals and achievements, let's look at the recent presentation at PR&D about water quality monitoring. It was laudable that you thank staff for sharing water quantity monitoring data. Perhaps you've accomplished something that was not made clear in the discussion. Is your goal to reduce human influences on water quantity level? Does that report, which was given after a 2-year period of monitoring, indicate you have achieved that goal? Is your goal for the water quantity monitoring to determine if irrigation pumps are impacting water quantity? If that is your goal, based on the comments during the January 25th PR&D meeting, you don't have adequate data to determine that. If that is your goal, are you planning to ask the Land and Water Conservation Division to get that data? Is your goal to get a baseline of water quantity in the county? Or perhaps your goal is to measure the trends of water quantity over time. If so, perhaps you are working toward your goal. Perhaps you have multiple goals in this monitoring program. What are they, and are you accomplishing them? Do you need additional measurements to accomplish whatever goals you are trying to achieve? You may recall that Kevin Masaryk recommended that if you are going to set up a monitoring program, be clear about the goals of your program. The PR&D committee members often speak of needing to monitor water quality more widely through the county. Is the goal to have a baseline, follow trends over time, and/or monitor the success of water quality improvement programs? You already have data to indicate some townships and some environmentally sensitive areas have water quality problems. What is happening in those specific areas to enact change and to review the success of those programs? Is there more that can be done if the county, townships, and citizens work together to address the contaminated wells? There is a regular theme in PR&D about the need to find funds for water quality monitoring, and most recently a question at PR&D about what monitoring would be appropriate. It would seem expense has stymied positive action forward, although it is good to hear that you are talking about possibly using ARPA funds for this. It is worth noting that the town of Colfax tested coliform nitrate in 21 sections for just $1,276, fully covering the test fees, although the figure does not include postage. It is suggested the county work with townships to establish a water testing program within each township. A 50% cost share program with the townships would mean roughly $700 from each township and $15,400 total for the county to do a basic coliform nitrate test in a majority of the sections in the county. It may be some townships wouldn't participate in such a monitoring program, but it is likely some townships would particularly if the county water specialist would guide the organization of the program. Such a program shows water testing is important in rural wells as well as urban water sources and mobilizes cooperative action toward a baseline. It also sets relatively manageable financial precedent for future cooperative monitoring to follow trends and impact of actions taken to improve water quality. Admittedly, some say private wells are private, therefore the owner's responsibility to monitor. As we all know, groundwater doesn't recognize landowner boundaries. Groundwater contamination is a public health issue. It is suggested to explore with the various conservation groups and other interested companies within Dunn County funding for specialty tests such as PFAS. It is possible that some groups and companies would be willing to fund specialty tests. To seed that process, I would be willing to donate the funds at the price quoted by Chase Cummings on January 26, 2022 for one PFA test in an area that might be vulnerable to PFA poisoning. Are there groups, individuals, companies that may be willing to help with a specialty monitoring program? It's time to set a goal of what testing you want to accomplish and then explore who might participate in and fund such a program. As you know, there is a significant citizen interest in water quality. That interest needs to be mobilized towards specific goals and actions. The county PR&D and its agencies and the public health department are uniquely positioned to mobilize community action. I hope you will. Thank you, Catherine Stahl, Dunn County citizen.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Kathy, for the thoughtful comments. I just take a minute to ask if the committee has any comments they would like to make in response to the thoughtful points that Kathy raised.
Question, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Supervisor Bjork.
Ms. Brooke.
On that PFAS chemicals, I know that they come from firefighting foam and that kind of stuff. Are there any other sources where that PFAS could come from? Do you know of?
I don't know. Does anyone else have a reasonably intelligent answer to that?
I just
Well, there
I
are,
mean,
it
it's
does come
ubiquitous.
from,
Go ahead, Mike.
even things like the nonstick pans and
Yeah.
all different kinds of things like that, yeah.
Okay.
It's relatively ubiquitous in our lifestyle these days. So, but whether there's any that are as concentrated, I'm not sure.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else? So I do have one, I do think these are really good comments and prompt some serious introspection, but here's what I've been thinking is that we have, as a committee, decided that we would like to do a baseline water quality program, and that we would take advantage of this ARPA funds, or try to take advantage of the ARPA funds that are available to provide the funding for that. I think that Kathy's note raises a really good point about cooperation with the towns in funding and implementing that. My thought has been that yesterday, for example, the CR&T committee passed a resolution asking the county to allocate a certain amount of ARPA funds to support the 2022 grant proposals for broadband expansion. And we've talked as a committee about doing a similar thing for water quality. And I think the time is coming when we should, very soon, when we should actually do that. We should propose an amount of money to be allocated for that kind of a program. I'll defer to the county board chair as to when that makes the most sense. But having that proposal ready does make sense, I think. Also, I think we should look, and we can talk about this at future meetings, we should look at in developing that plan, it provides an opportunity, I think, to get input from community stakeholders. So rather than not having a fully formed Water Resources Council, doesn't mean that we can't establish an informal advisory group that could have this, at least for the specific job right now, of helping us design and develop a budget for what a water quality program would look like. So I'm going to be supporting that kind of a discussion in the near future in our committee, and asking staff to, we've already talked to staff about putting some of that together, but I think we need to move on it so we get it in front of the board before the time is lost. Anyway, those are my thoughts. Appreciate the comments. Some of the criticisms are well placed, and I'll accept my share of responsibility for not being as clear about our task as we could be. Anything else anybody has?
I'll add to that. As far as the timing, I think it would be best if you would have that resolution passed, so we could rule or take it up to the board at our March capital improvement plan.
Yep.
At least I guess that would be the latest date I would like to see it come to the board, because I think I know that highway is going to be probably asking for some ARPA fund money because of their situation with their highway fund and equipment, that there's no equipment in the budget for replacement. So anyway, I just think I think that would be the latest date that I would recommend it come to, at least be there for that meeting. And also a comment, I totally agree with Kathy, and I think the only way we're going to be able to start testing some wells for a baseline is to use some ARPA money. I think that I really do think that. But to get the towns involved, and I mentioned this before, I think probably every township, I would hope every township would be willing to test their own wells. And that would put one extra well in every township that's being tested for a baseline. And maybe on those, you could go the extra, spend the extra dollars and get them tested completely at the township expense. But, you know, if the county were to do another half dozen in each township, or I don't know, whatever your plan is, I just think it'd be nice to get the towns involved. It kind of sounds like the town of Colfax has done that already. Maybe some of the other townships would be willing for that. I sure would try to support our township into testing, you know, having our well tested if the county was going to come up with some plan.
Okay. So, thanks, Dave. All right, let's, we'll move that along. A good recommendation. We have no public hearing today. Without objection, we have a pretty short agenda, but without objection, I'd like to move item number 9 up to before staff reports, right after number 5. So Alec can get on with his day. I don't think his reports can take very long either, but not making him sit through ours. So Alec, if you're ready, could you provide us a review of what you're going to present?
Sure. This first item you see it doesn't require any action. It's just a summary of the 2021 enrollees in the program. Name of the participant, the resource protected, the species, the damaging species, the abatement I recommended, and then the township in which that enrollee was located. I can answer any questions anyone has about it, but it's just here for your guys' information. It doesn't require any action from the committee. And if there are no questions, we can move on to claim approval.
Any questions? Okay. Let's move on.
There are 2 claims in Dunn County for 2021. These claims were calculated based off the commodity prices this committee approved at the meeting in early January. That was $13.10 a bushel for soybeans, $2.66 for each pumpkin, and 39 cents a pound for squash. Both these enrollees complied with my recommended abatement, which was a deer shooting permit. They met their harvest objectives. They were cooperative. I have no reason to recommend the denial of their claim. So the numbers you see here are the damage appraised and then the claim total after the $500 standard deductible. I could answer any questions there are. If not, I'd recommend this committee approve these 2 claims for 2021.
Any questions for Alec? Okay. Could I have a motion to approve the 2 claims that's presented?
Supervisor Bjork makes that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second, Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Morehouse seconds. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. They are approved. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you.
Now we'll go up to our regular number 6, our staff reports, starting with the Register of Deeds. Anything you want to point out, Heather? Or anyone have any
morning.
questions?
Yep, nothing to add.
Any questions from the committee?
This is Mike here. Heather, it just seems like the numbers are so big every month. I keep thinking, is this for the year? But wow, you guys keep busy. Nice job.
Yeah, I feel like I say that every month. So this month I was actually going to report that, January was a little quieter. But
Okay. If there are no other questions, we'll move on then.
Thank you, Heather.
thank you.
PR&D, Survey Division.
Good morning, everybody. One thing I would just like to touch on is, we went to our annual Surveyors Conference, and I just want to thank the committee again for, we come to you at budget time asking for money for continuing education, and this is what that money you've appropriated went to this year. It's a 3-day conference. It's 2 full days and then a half a day on Friday, and wide variety of topics that are covered each year. There's usually attorneys there giving presentations on legal issues, just a lot of good experts in their fields. And it's a way that we can, myself and my staff, stay current on survey related matters. So I put the brochure from the conference in the packet here. Hopefully you've had a chance to kind of go through and see what sessions were offered. So often I find that, they offer 5 sessions at a time slot, and there's 3 things you really want to go to, but you can only go to one of them. So it tells you the quality of the content when you're stuck on deciding where you want to go for that 1 or 2 hour block. So other than that, I don't have anything to add from my report. Unless there's any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Jim
questions?
Anderson here.
Yeah,
Tom,
Jim.
where was this held? Where did you go for this? I guess I missed that.
Every year it was at I guess in the recent past, it's always been at the Kalahari down at the Dells.
Yeah.
For a while, it was in Green Bay. It used to be at the Holiday Inn in Stevens Point years ago. Our group is getting so large that about the only venue that can hold us is the Kalahari right now. So
It's so large. In other words, every county had probably what? How many from Dunn County were there?
This is open. I mean, there's more than just surveyors. It's open. I mean, you could go.
Got it. Thanks,
if you
Tom.
wanted to, Jim. I mean, there's people from other states. There's realtors. There's register of deeds come to this. Real property listers.
All right.
Title companies, attorneys, land surveyors. I mean, there's young surveyors that are still in school. We even have high school kids that come there because they want to learn more about surveying. There's roughly about 1,000 people that attend each year from a wide variety of disciplines and a wide variety of ages. There's people there that are, 15, 16 years old, all the way up to in their 90s.
Sounds great, Tom. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Okay, let's move on. Land and Water, I think Chase isn't here, but Bob is here if we have any questions about this. Anybody have any questions? Bob, you have any comments? That'd be fine.
Chase is doing a good job.
Yeah.
Agree.
It's a complicated world right now.
You got that on tape now too for your next employee evaluation.
Good. No.
Yeah,
we have a lot going on here. I'm sure Chase has has detailed that.
Okay.
Well, Bob, nice to see you here. We'll tell Chase that you did a great job. My question is, unfortunately, and I understand why we had to cancel the Red Cedar conference on March 2nd through 4th. However, I certainly hope we get that going back again. It's very important.
And sorry about. So Bob, that is such a valuable conference. I hope we can get that going again, but I understand why it had to be canceled.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Okay, let's move on then. Planning and zoning. Any comments, Ann?
I don't have any comments, but I can certainly answer any questions if anybody has any.
Sure. Any questions?
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
I don't have a question, but I was going to actually ask at our last meeting, Anne, about where we were on the comp plan update. And so you've included that in this report, and it would be helpful for you to clue us in on progress as you're making it. But thanks for getting that started again.
Yeah, absolutely. No, just kind of kicking that off again. A lot of stuff was already done, I think, in the last year just to get that rolling. So we'll just continue that.
Good.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I can echo also what Diane said. It'd be nice to kind of remind us where we're at a future meeting in a more specific way. So look forward to that.
Sounds good.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Burke.
I had a question for like Mr. Kaner, but apparently I didn't unmute myself.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's my fault completely. But my question is, they're talking about forming a Lake Tainer district there. What would be their main goals? Is it for like water testing, or is it, what would be their main goals on that?
I will hesitate to speak of that. I think we do have Chase is working on that, and maybe our water quality specialist is working with that group.
Okay.
It's an aggressive group. I think they have high aspirations of maybe taking another whole approach to getting something done in the watershed. That's just what I've heard. But Chase will work with them. Our group will work with them and try to assist them in whatever way we can, to make them successful.
Okay. Maybe, Mr. Chairman, on a future agenda, we could have some updates on that and just see what their goals are and how they kind of plan on accomplishing those goals.
Yeah, that is what we're going to do. I've been meeting with Chase and a couple meetings with the representatives from there. And we've talked about when they are ready, which is coming up, I think, pretty soon, having it on our agenda for them to make a presentation on that. And I know there's still a little bit of flux about, they've got to basically to form the association and have the tax levy authority they want. They have to go through a fairly rigorous process of getting petitions signed by landowners, and they're about to kick that off. There's some timelines they have to follow, but before they do, they will come to our committee and sort of provide us an overview of what their plans are and what their expectations are. I think Bob is right. I know at least part of it is looking at some different approaches that have been tried before. So we will learn more about that.
Okay, thank you, Tom.
Yep. Anything else?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
My question is for Ann, if she just remind me of what we're working with Cedar Corp on, what's happening there. In her report, she says that, so.
We have a contract with Cedar Corp to work with them to create the comprehensive plan update.
All right.
So Bob Coulson started that process, and it got partly completed. I think that there's some questions now we have to ask about, is this the direction that we want to go? And Ann's taking it over now. She has the opportunity to look at that and see if there are any any adjustments we want to make in the direction. I think one of the questions that's going to come up at some point in time is how do we get public community input on it? And we need to talk about that as a committee. Some of the questions are, how do you foster a really thoughtful discussion in the community about land use and in some ways about landscape? What do we want our landscape to be like in Dunn County? And trying to get more clarity about that so it can inform the planning decisions and the zoning decisions that we make. It's all too often, unfortunately, we don't have clear comp plan direction on some zoning requests that come to us. So anyway, that's ongoing also. And
Yes, thank you. I guess I knew about that. We've contracted with them in the past for other things.
Right.
That's why I was asking that question. Thank you.
And I guess I would ask this: Are you? I mean, it's sort of your baby now in a way, as far as coordinating it. Are you thinking of continuing to work with Cedar Corp, or is there any thought of maybe looking at another option?
Well, I mean, if I would have started this off from the beginning, maybe, I would have had a chance to maybe take some different routes, but the money is already set aside with Cedar Corps. There's a contract that has been signed by Bob Colson and Cedar Corps. A lot of work has been done already. So I don't know if it would be appropriate to totally switch gears at this point. But again, that's kind of why I want to have this meeting with them, go through everything and just see what the plan is. Just kind of go from there.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any other questions on any of the sections? All right. Then thanks to staff for all those reports. Let's see. I think we're down to 6C, which is the subdivision review and review of the subdivision plat review and approval process. This is something that was, I think, Mike Kinnear suggested that we will have some land division subdivision opportunities coming up, and it would be good for us to, as a committee, have a review of what our process is and what our opportunities are. Tommy Carlson, you gonna take us through this?
Sure, I can do this. Back in 2018, I used roughly the same outline because the committee had some questions at that time. So I've pretty much taken my old presentation and tweaked it somewhat. So we'll just go through this really quick. If there's any questions, feel free to stop me at any point. So this is all encompassing. It's not just subdivision plats, but I thought I would throw in the certified survey maps as well, because they're all more or less interrelated. So the types of land divisions that are reviewed by the county, of course, are certified survey maps, and then subdivision plats. And those plats can be broken down into a county plat or state plat. And we'll get into those differences here very shortly. And then also condominium plats. So if we start with CSMs, when is a CSM required? Well, basically, anytime land is divided into parcels which are less than 20 acres in size. And that standard is right in our land division ordinance. Parcels remaining as a result of the land division, which are less than 20 acres in size, also are required to be mapped as a CSM lot. So if I have a 25-acre parcel and I'm carving 7 acres out of there, that remaining 18 acres is also going to require a certified survey map on it. So a CSM by statute can include up to 4 lots, no more than 4. It's a combination of lots and outlots, because we can also have outlots. So a total of 4 lots or outlots. Maximum, so our ordinance says you can create a maximum of 4 lots per 40 within a 5-year period. If you own your contiguous tract, say is 80 acres, you can do 4 lots on each one of the 40. So you could do 8 lots in there in a 5-year period through the CSM process. If you want to exceed the number of lots, then that has to be done through the platting process. In no way does the land division ordinance trump the zoning ordinance. So let's just say we're in a zone township that is density based, general ag, and somebody on 40 acres is allowed 5 lots. the platting process is not a way for them to bypass or create more than, bypass the zoning ordinance and create, say, 8 lots in that 40. It would require a rezone before that would happen. So just so we're clear on this, additional lots need to be created through the platting process. Basically, if I want to do more than 4 on a 40 in a 5-year period. So any questions up to this point? So the surveyor, during the review process, he or she has to submit the following documents: a minor subdivision application, the actual map, and then our review fee. Once we get all those items, the application is deemed complete. Then what I do is I distribute copies to Planning and Zoning Division. They review it, not only if it's in a zone township, but also if they're in an unzoned township, they're looking for items such as, shoreline zoning compliance, or if there's floodplain issues. I send a copy to the respective town chair and clerk. The highway department gets a copy, if applicable, if the land division's abutting a state or a county trunk highway. And then if we're on a state highway or the interstate, I-94, a copy gets sent to the DOT for their review as well. And then the city of Menominee exercises their extraterritorial plat review authority. So if any land divisions that come in, certified survey map or plat for that matter, that is within 1.5 miles of the city limits for Menominee, I send a copy to the clerk of the city as well. So once we get all this information, the application is deemed complete. We have 90 days in which to review and approve the certified survey map. So what do we review it for? Of course, Chapter 16 of the County Land Division Ordinance, Chapter 13 of our Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance, Chapter 236.34 of state statutes, and also AE 7 of Wisconsin Administrative Code. So I have a whole checklist that I run each certified survey map through, so I make sure I don't miss anything. Most reviews go fairly well. Some of them go right through. There's no revisions. Other ones have a few minor revisions, and some of them have quite a few revisions. So there's a process back and forth. I communicate with the surveyor, let them know what needs to be changed. And then once we get the map in final form, it gets signed off on and eventually recorded at the Register of Deeds. In the process, though, some of these certified survey maps need to go before the respective township. A lot of our towns now are adopting their own land division ordinances, which are independent from the county land division ordinance. So they require a review fee, a meeting, sometimes with the town plan commission and the town board. It needs signatures. And so sometimes it's, it can take a month to get a project through, especially if it needs town review. So that concludes the certified survey map portion. CSMs are not seen, reviewed, or approved by this PR&D committee, only in certain circumstances. And it seems lately we've had these rare circumstances happen more often than not. And that's when a certified survey map crosses the exterior boundary of a recorded subdivision plat. You may remember we've had at least 2, maybe 3 of these in the last year and a half. So that would be the only instance where the committee would need to approve a certified survey map. And that approval is required right in state statute. It's spelled out. If your certified survey map is altering the exterior boundary of a recorded subdivision plat, the new CSM has to be approved in the same manner as the plat would have been approved. In other words, PR&D committee approves plats, therefore you need to approve this type of certified survey map. So I will move on to the other portion of the land divisions that we review. This by far has been the minority, the subdivision plats. For years we hadn't received any. It seems lately now we're averaging about 1 a year. So, which I guess is a sign of the times, good thing. So subdivision plat review, they can be broken down into a state plat or a county plat. So a state plat happens when the act of division creates 5 or more parcels of 1.5 acres each or less in area, or 5 or more parcels of 1.5 acres each or less in area are created by successive divisions within a period of 5 years. So if I do 2 lots today that are 1 acre and next year I do 3, that triggers a state plat, even though the initial 2 lots didn't. So it's 5 in successive divisions over a 5-year period, or 5 all at once. The other option is creating a county plat. So the active division creates 5 or more parcels or building sites less than 20 acres in area, of which no more than 4 lots are 1.5 acres or less in area, or 5 or more lots, each less than 20 acres in area, of which no more than 4 lots are 1.5 acres or less in area, are created by successive divisions within a period of 5 years. So basically, don't hit that 5th lot, and the plat does not need any state reviews. It doesn't really save the applicant time, but it does save them review fees down at the state. No matter what route is taken, the county still reviews both types of plats, and we still charge the same fee for that review. So all land within the exterior boundary of a state plat or county plat shall be zoned for its intended purpose. I want to focus on this a little bit because to me, this is a really important sentence. All land needs to be zoned for its intended purpose. And I know in the past, there's been discussion on some of these plats that have went through that, well, we've got so many lots. We got, 54 lots on 80 acres, and it's just too dense. And what are we doing to the groundwater? We have to remember these plats were rezoned. Typically, before they were platted, the land was not in a zoning class, wasn't in a residential zoning classification. So the applicant needed to go through the rezone process first. This committee and the full county board looked at the applicant's request. The township that it was in also looked at it, because remember, towns have veto authority. So these properties were rezoned into a residential area, and the residential zoning district allows for a 1 acre minimum lot size. So to me, one of the most important processes in the overall process is at the rezone stage. This committee really has to weigh each request and decide, okay, is this an area, is this subject site, is this an area that we want to see residential development happen on? And if so, we're going to rezone it, but we have to remember that the subdivider can create 1 acre lots. And by the time they put their infrastructure in, their streets, roads, drainage areas, retention ponds, whatever, if their goal is to maximize the number of lots and they make them all at least 1 acre, they are in full compliance with the county zoning and the county land division ordinance. So I just want to make that very clear. When we get to the platting stage, it's very difficult for us to approach the landowner or the subdivider at that point and say, well, we think this is way too dense of a development. Instead of doing, say, 50 lots, we would prefer that you did 30 lots. And we have to be careful. I always say there's 2 words that start with R. There's recommendations and requirements. We have to be careful requiring somebody or saying, well, we're not going to approve this plat unless you do, make less lots on here. It's a strong recommendation, but we can't require it. If we use the word require, we had better make sure that we have some backing in our ordinance. We have to point to something in the ordinance or state law that is forcing them to do that. Otherwise, it's just merely a recommendation. They can take our recommendation, or they can say, you know what, with all due respect, this is what we're doing. We're in full compliance with your county code of ordinances, and you have no basis for denial of our concept or of our preliminary plat. So is everybody clear on this? Because I think sometimes that gets lost in the mix. We see the preliminary plat, and then all of a sudden, geez, we didn't expect this. There's so many lots, and what is this going to do to the groundwater? I think the discussion has to be had at the rezone level, and perhaps the zoning ordinance, or the land division ordinance. Both ordinances have a 1 acre minimum lot size in there for most land divisions. Now, there are some exceptions, but right now, if somebody creates a 1 acre lot, it complies with our county ordinances. So are there any questions on this? Because I think it's a very, very important point, and I don't want to move on until everybody, is clear in your mind on this.
Yeah, so Tom, it's Mike here. I do have maybe a comment. I think when you said that it's the zoning, that is really the key. And it's nice that you explained it so well. But as a PRD, we need to consider unintended consequences when we do make some zoning changes. Just give you an example. 2015 is, I think, when the county did the rezone, and the town of Menominee worked closely with them. and zoned some parcels general commercial. At that time, there were no residences allowed in general commercial other than business owners. And then 2 years later, in 2017, general commercial was changed so that duplexes could be added and multifamily houses could be on those lots. Now that had the unintended consequences of taking every general commercial in the county and saying, well, now we can have a development of duplexes. And that's the situation that the town of Menominee finds itself in right now because we didn't catch that. So as we make these decisions in the future and look at the different, seemingly harmless zoning changes, we really have to consider other kinds of things too. And I want to make sure I'm not saying I'm for or against the upcoming subdivision. It's just that things changed without the town understanding it. And I think I was actually on the PR&D when we changed it, and I didn't catch it either. So yeah, that zoning is the key before anything else. Yeah, I agree with you, Tom.
Anyone else?
Okay, hearing none, I'm going to keep moving on. So we have a pre-application consultation. It's recommended, highly encouraged, but it's not required. So subdividers are encouraged to come in, meet with department staff, bring a sketch plan of the proposed land division. And this meeting provides a basis for discussion between the subdivider and staff. The last thing we want is for a developer to expend a bunch of time and money on an engineer, a land surveyor, on a project that may be denied because of either zoning regulations or would need extensive site modifications based on things that they weren't anticipating. So often people go out and purchase a piece of land and don't think there's any wetlands. What is actually a mapped wetland sometimes doesn't look like a wetland. It doesn't need cattails to be classified as a wetland. So people are thinking, I've got 40 acres, I can develop this whole thing. When we start looking at the soils out there, different depths of groundwater, and all of a sudden they realize, hey, where I have a proposed public street here is on land with very unsuitable soils. So it's a good idea for the subdivider to come in and meet with staff. It's highly encouraged. So once the project gets moving, the first step is, of course, the preliminary plat submittal. That gets filed or gets submitted to the county. We have a fee and an application, of course, and then copies of the preliminary plat are distributed to different, county departments, divisions, highway department, if applicable, the Department of Natural Resources, the DOT, town clerk, clerk of adjoining city or village. Again, if that's if they're exercising their extraterritorial plat review authority, and then each public or private utility. So the PR&D committee, within 90 days of filing of this preliminary plat, needs to either approve, conditionally approve, or reject the plat unless we mutually agree with the subdivider to extend that time. If we take no action within 90 days, it is automatic, it constitutes an automatic approval. So what happens is staff review the preliminary plat for all the technical information, compliance with the ordinance, and then we make a recommendation to the PR&D committee, who makes the actual decision. So in red here, very important paragraph, approval or conditional approval of a preliminary plat shall not constitute automatic approval of the final plat, except if the final plat is submitted within 36 months of the preliminary plat and a plat approval and conforms substantially to the preliminary plat layout, the final plat shall be entitled to approval with respect to such layout. And this is very important. If once we approve that preliminary plat, if the final comes back in within 36 months and it conforms substantially, we can't change our mind and say, well, now we don't like this. Some more information came to light and we're not going to approve this. We can't do that. So that, in my mind, the preliminary plat is, do I dare say this, is more important than the final. I mean, the final plat is what gets recorded. but that preliminary plat is very important. Now, what is substantially the same form? I mean, if somebody comes in with a 25 lot subdivision and between the preliminary and the final, they add 1 lot or maybe remove 2 lots, in my mind, it's substantially the same. But if they, had a horseshoe road going in to serve the development, and then at the final, they come back with a dead end cul-de-sac, well, to me, it's not in substantially the same form. So it is a judgment call. And, thankfully, the plats that have been coming in, the finals have all been in substantially the same form. We haven't had any difficult judgment calls to make on that. And I don't foresee any of that happening. I mean, most developers want to work with the county. They don't want problems. Same with the county. I feel like, we want to work and help the developer as long as they're in compliance, make sure that they're complying with our ordinance. It's our job to assist the public. So does anybody have questions on this piece of it? And again, at the preliminary, we have to be careful with those 2 R words, recommend and require. We have to be very careful telling them, well, we're not, if we're going to not approve or deny approval of their preliminary plat, it had better be based on some very good reasoning, and we better be able to point to the ordinance that something is deficient, they're not complying. It can't be something subjective, such as we think there's too many lots here. So any questions on this? We are going to be seeing a preliminary plat, hopefully at our next PR&D meeting or the first meeting in March. So.
Tom, Mr. Chairman, can I speak? What's my role here?
Yeah.
Is that all right? So we work alongside Tom, kind of back and forth, reviewing these preliminary plats and also the concept plat, the one that comes in before the preliminary plat. And just to clarify, Tom, to me too, we now have a preliminary plat in front of us, an application, correct?
Correct.
After we receive that, there is a lot of back and forth between Tom Carlson, our spokesman, and the developer and the developer's engineer. There's a lot of work that gets done back and forth saying you may want to think about this, or this is going to be an issue, because once you accept the final or the preliminary plat, when you say I accept this, it basically meets the conditions of the county. Is that right?
Correct.
Yep. So there's a process that's going on right now. We meet, Tom and I, Chase, whoever, and then Tom compiles the information, gets back to the engineer and the developer, and then they either make their edits or they say, no, thank you. Or, and it's that during that process, we can recommend things for them to think about or maybe do different. I just wanted to say that. That concept map is a step before, where we get hopefully an air photo with a plat layout on it on top of this air photo. And then we can take that and bring up soil layers, wetland layers, and kind of look at the preliminary big picture. Is this going to be a mess or not? And then we try to work with that developer to make suggestions. But that's an important step. And I don't think that used to go on. I think the relationship is getting better with these engineering firms, and they're actually acknowledging that, working with Dunn County a little bit more. But it's hard. That one before us right now, can I talk about that?
Well, I think in general terms, it's not agenda, so we have to be careful about,
okay,
but we can speak in general terms. Mm-hmm.
What we have the ability to look at is the soils of that parcel. And so does the developer, and so does the engineering firm. Soils, wetlands, hydric soils. So when you click on the soil layer of NRCS's web soil survey, it comes up as soils, septic tank absorption fields have high limitations on this parcel. And it's all red. So then we look at that, and that's a concern. But then as we study it further, we learn that they can put in mound systems to work around that. They can't they typically won't be able to put add grade systems, but they can put in mound systems. So then we have to kind of work through that, you know.
I mean, in the past, we've asked for a layout. Show us, you know, where an average size home, a 15 to 1800 square foot home is going to fit on this site, given the zoning setbacks, the buffers from the wetlands. Where's your septic going to go and where's your well going to go? You know, they didn't have to do that. That happened on Timber Valley. We asked for that because we were concerned about some of the lots having adequate buildable area for the home, the well, the septic, and its replacement. So it's things like that. We try, and there's a lot of behind the scenes things going on before this actually comes to the PR&D committee. So, and at the end of the day, we have to make a recommendation to the committee on whether or not we feel it complies. So I guess the most useful tool we have in this is our ordinance. That's the tool for implement. Our ordinance is a way that we can implement policy for this committee. So, and when something comes to you with our recommendation, you can be assured that, you know, we didn't spend just 15 minutes on this and whip out a staff report. I mean, there's a lot of staff time went into our recommendation. So, and thank you, Bob, for, you know, expanding on some of the things we do, because I think it's easy to forget, or it's not seen in the big picture that everything going on behind the scenes that staff are involved in.
Yeah, that was very helpful, Bob. Thank you.
Any more questions on the preliminary plat? If not, I'll move into the final plat. So again, I mean, once the preliminary is approved, they have to prepare a final plat, and there's certain technical requirements, has to be on the right size paper, you know, whole checklist of things. There's typically more information on the final plat than on the preliminary. You know, we have bearings and distances on all the lines, you know, exact acreages, notes and stuff. If we have drainage easements, there's surveyor's notes, there's all kinds of certificates, approval certificates. So when that comes in, we give that a thorough review as well. But the lot layout is pretty much set because it's a mirror image typically of the preliminary plat. So we run closures, make sure every lot closes, make sure the areas that are reported are correct, so there's no issues with taxation going forward. So all these entities get a copy that you can see here of that final plat. Now the preliminary, we have 90 days. The final, we have 60 days in which to review and either approve. So the PR&D committee within 60 days shall approve or reject the plat unless we extend the time with the subdivider. And then the committee chair certifies on the face of the plat that it has been approved. If it's rejected, we have to state in the minutes provide a written statement of the reasons, and then send that on to the surveyor and their client or the developer. If we take no action within 60 days, then it constitutes an automatic approval. State plats, so if it's a county plat, they don't need approval by the state, but if it's a state plat, the Department of Administration also has an approval block they need to sign off on. And then if it's impacted by a state or a interstate highway, the DOT also has to sign off on it. They have 30 days in which to approve or deny the final plat. And then ultimately all these documents, certified survey map and either a state or a county plat, they get recorded at the Register of Deeds. And then from that point, title transfers can take place, land assessment takes over, all these parcels are given new PIN numbers, they're entered in the tax roll. So it's a CSMs, you know, from beginning to end, sometimes are done in a month or less. Plats take several months, sometimes years before, you know, from concept to final recording and title transfers. So any questions on the general land division review process?
Any questions? Yeah, Gary.
Why would any developer go with a state plat as compared to a county one? What advantages why would they want to do that?
Strictly the number of lots. You know,
Okay.
if I have 40 acres and my goal after I put my streets in is to sell as many, have as many marketable lots as I want, I'm gonna make them the bare minimum, right? 1 acre excluding road right of way. And because of that, that triggers us, based on what my goals are for the property, it triggers a state plat. Now, if my goals are to make a, I've got a area of the county that I think, 3 to 4 acre lots are gonna sell really well for whatever reason, then as long as I can still make 4 of them under an acre and a half, an acre and a half or less. And then if I make all the rest 3 or 4 acres, I avoid the state review. And again, it's review fees. They're not hefty review fees, I guess, in my opinion, but typically a state plat is triggered because I'm trying to make as many small lots as the ordinance will allow.
Well,
So
let me, rephrase the question. If by county, if that 40 acre parcel was rezoned to residential, then would there be any benefit to going to state as compared to a county plat?
Well, I guess I don't look at it as a benefit, a county versus a state. It's more, I look at it as a strictly black and white requirement. And it's based on what the developer they come in the office, the first thing they have is a sketch with all these lots. And we start looking at them, and right away, if I see all these lots are under an acre and a half, I let them know it's not that they come in and say, well, my preference is to do a state plat. It's more, this is how many lots I want to do. What rules do I have to follow? And to me, it's a technical requirement. It's not a, well, I'm going to prefer to do a state plat. I don't know if I'm answering your question.
No, I'm still kind of confused of what the major difference is. If that 40 acre parcel was also like rezoned before you came into residential. That's what because then you can have your 40 lots basically, but not 40 because of the roads and that kind of stuff and setbacks. But I kind of understand it, but not as much as I would like to have understood it. But
and I'm sorry, I'm not fully answering your question, but I guess I'll take the blame. I don't fully understand the question.
Well, the question is like why would a person want to spend more money and probably take a little more time going to state as compared to a county if you could still end up with the same amount of lots on that?
That's
parcel.
the problem. You can't. So if you've got 40 acres, Gary, and you want to max, if you've got 40 acres and your goal is to avoid a state plat, you don't want the extra time or pay the extra money.
Okay.
You can do 4 lots, an acre and a half or less, and the rest all got to be bigger. So I'm going to just throw a number out. So say by doing that, you end up, and this could be way off the wall here, but let's just say you end up with 17 lots on that 40 acres. Okay.
Yep.
Well, you're thinking, geez, this was my nest egg. This is my retirement piece of land. And I'm a developer. I want to maximize the number. You're telling me, Tom, I can only do 17. Well, what are my options? Or I want to make more lots. I was really thinking I could get 25 lots out of this 40. Well, then the discussion heads towards the state plat route, because that's the only way you can, I can't do 25 lots and meet the requirements of a county plat. In order to do 25 lots, I'm going to end up with more than 4 that are an acre and a half or less. It's strictly, what am I starting with on my tract that I own, and what is my end result? And that dictates whether or not I have to do I don't look at it as what is my preference. I look at it as what is the ordinance requiring me to do? Am I going to be required? So I'm starting with the number of lots I want to make, and then the ordinance tells me what I'm required to do. It's not really my choice. It's thou shalt do a state plat if you want to do 25 lots here. Does that answer your question?
The same developer, if he came in and got a rezoned residential, he can still get the same number of lots at the state, right? Because residential, you got down to 1 acre for Dunn County. That's the part that's kind of getting me confused is if you got a rezone, why wouldn't it be the same?
Well, typically when people are rezoning, they're in a general ag zoning district and it's density based. It's a 8
Yeah.
to 1, 8 to 1 ratio. The minimum lot size is still 1 acre, but it's a density based ratio. And that tells me on 40 acres, if I do the math, I can only do 5 lots. They can all be, small lots, or some of them can be an acre if they want. They don't have to be 5 acres, but I can only do 5 lots on that 40. And if my goal is to put a residential subdivision with 25 lots in there, I am forced to do a rezone. Once it's rezoned, I'm not bound by density anymore. I can put as many lots on that 40, and as long as I comply with that 1 acre minimum lot size, by the time I put my roads in, I take my net buildable area that's left and divide it by 1 acre lots, and however many I can get in there, I can get. But again, if my goal is to maximize my lots, I will be forced to do a state plat. I can't do a county plat.
So I don't want to like you go on and on about this, but if you went with a state plat in a general ag to get more lots, would you have to get it like rezoned in?
Definitely, yeah.
Okay.
A state plat, and just so we're clear on that, the platting process, I think maybe this is the part that we're still struggling with here. And if so, maybe I didn't do a good enough job explaining. This sentence right here on your screen, additional lots must be created through the platting process. That's provided it's allowed by zoning.
Oh, okay.
So let's just say we're in an unzoned township for the sake of argument here. I own 40 acres in an unzoned township. We'll say I'm in New Haven for the time being. So I did 4 lots on that 40. Well, I come into the county surveyor's office this afternoon and I say, Tom, I want to do 17 lots on this 40. I give them 2 options, right? They can do it by certified survey map, but if they do it by CSM, they're only going to be able to do 4 right now. Once it's recorded, they have to wait 5 years from the day it's recorded. Then they can do another 4. They could accomplish a 17 lot subdivision in the town of New Haven by certified survey map, spaced out a phased development approach over time and not have to go through the platting process. Typically, though, developers want it all done in one shot. They want to get these lots marketed. They don't want to take 20 years to develop a 40, let's say. So they asked me what the other option is. I said, well, the other option would be to do a plat out there. And that's what this last sentence here means. Additional lots must be created through the platting process. So if that person says, I want to get 17 lots on the market before Christmas, I tell them, you're going to have to do a plat. And then we break it down based on how big the lots are. They may be forced to do a county plat or forced to do a state plat, or they may be allowed to do a county plat depending on how many lots they're creating that are 1.5 acres or less in size. Let's take this and apply it now to a zone township, and we'll pick on Red Cedar. So somebody comes in with 40 acres in the town of Red Cedar, that's zone general ag. And they pose the same question. I want to do a 17 lot development here. I can't say the same thing to that person because the circumstances are different. So the first thing I do is I look up zoning, I consult with Ann, and we find out it's general ag, okay? So Ann and I communicate or have a discussion with the landowner, let them know that the current zoning classification is general ag. They have 40 acres, they're allowed 5 splits on that 40 ever for the life of the property. Now they can do that with a certified survey map, but they're only going to be able to do 4 lots in the first 5-year period, and then the 5th one will have to wait. If they come to us and say, well, I want to do a plat out here and bypass, well, the plat doesn't trump the general ag zoning. The plat works fine in the town of New Haven because they are an unzoned town. There's no density-based parcel creation there. But in Red Cedar, it's a whole different ballgame. They're allowed 5 splits on that 40 for the life of the property unless they rezone it. So the platting process is not going to work for them. They're violating Chapter 13 of the county zoning ordinance, which requires the property to be rezoned. Does that make sense? Because that's very, very important.
It makes a lot of sense. And what it really says is that the zoning trumps any kind of platting or plotting, right?
Well, yes, it does. I mean, the 2 work together, but you have to look at what's being more restrictive here. You can't apply a land division, I guess I'm very careful when I meet with people when we're done with the conversation, I say, well, from a survey side of things, this is what you can do, but zoning won't allow it. And you have to comply with whatever's more restrictive. You certainly can't violate the zoning ordinance just because the land division ordinance says it's okay to do. So every project we have to evaluate on its own merits. The
So
first
thank
thing-
you, Tom, because
Yeah,
now you answered my question, and
okay.
I'm sorry that it took so long and
Well-
for me to kind of like grasp that.
We got there. That's the important thing.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? I do have a couple, Tom. Just wondering what the typical cost to a developer is to go through the subdivision process with our county.
I'm not even going to give you a ballpark because I honestly don't know. I mean, I worked privately before I came to the county, and we did subdivision plats. I know what we charged on the survey side of things. I know what the engineer charged.
What about what about county permits? What about the county costs? What do we charge them for the permit?
Well, I have the fees right here. So on we charge a flat fee and then so much per lot. So it's kind of a three-headed monster here, if you will. The survey office, we charge $400 flat fee for the preliminary plat, and then $20 for each lot or outlet that is on the plat. That's at the preliminary, and then at the final, we charge the same exact fees. So when that comes in, it's another $400 plus $20 per lot or outlot. On the major land division, so the state or county plats, there's also a soil boring requirement that we added to the land division ordinance. You may remember it's 1 per lot. And the zoning office charges $35 for each soil report. And then land conservation also charges a fee for their review. If they have a, where is it here? $500 flat fee plus $20 per lot or outlot. And that's just a one-time, they charge it at the preliminary. They don't recharge that at the final. So there are, significant fees that we recover in our review. And of course, the developer has a huge fee between the engineering work and the surveying work. So yeah, it's not cheap to get a major land division approved through the county.
Right. I know my question after listening to you and Bob talk about all the back and forth work that goes on is that's a lot of hours that you folks are putting in, and just wondering whether or not that's a service to the landowner and or the developer, and at some point in time, maybe are we charging enough for it?
Well,
it does sound like a lot of work.
It is. I'm looking at our current fee schedule, and we adopted this, our committee, PR&D committee adopted this on March 25th of last year.
Right.
And prior to adopting this, we were tasked with making sure, I believe it was Supervisor Morehouse made the comment that, we have to make certain that we're covering our costs. And for years, our review fee was not updated. So we took a really hard look. Chase sat down, myself, I'm trying to remember, Ann wasn't here at the time, but Bob certainly was part of those discussions as well. And we increased our fees based on what we feel would cover our expenses. Now, every project's different. Certainly with certified survey maps, I see this a lot. Some of them, we certainly, I don't want to say are making money, but we're certainly covering our costs on some CSMs. Other ones, we're not. The back and forth is extensive, and I know we're not covering our costs. The only other option is to go with an escrow type fee, which, County Manager Paul Miller had suggested, a year or two ago to the committees as a way to cover our costs. We have chosen not to take that route. So we're going to win some, we're going to lose some, but we feel our current fee schedule is set up in a way that in the majority of the land divisions, we will be covering our costs. Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah,
and then one other question. Okay, go ahead, Bob.
Just to pipe in, there is follow-up on these too. Just because we get a really pretty document that's all neat and tidy, and then, say it's 6 months later and they bring the bulldozers in, things change and things can get messy. And, you know, I guess myself, just through my experience, I've been out on these sites during construction. I've worked with the contractors. I've been side by side with DNR. They're the ones that actually regulate the stormwater runoff, the construction, and making sure, you know, the as-built are submitted. But we're kind of the eyes and ears of DNR also. And so it does involve going out in the field and trying to keep a grip on things, I would say. So it's not one and done, you know.
Yeah.
And then what gets worse yet, then the private builder comes in, and if there's a 12% slope, then he has to figure out how to put a house in there, you know, and there's another whole disruption of the ground and runoff and everything else. But I guess that's the building inspector that does that, I think. That's not
Okay.
us.
All right. Thanks. And one other question, Tom, I guess you made a point of stressing that the key initial decision is the decision to do the rezone. But and I think that's true, but when we do a rezone, we don't base that on all of the environmental factors that you do with regard to evaluating the plat and stuff, right? It's more of a general land use question. So I'm not sure.
Yeah, and you know, Ann is with us. Perhaps she has a unique perspective on this as well, or something I'm missing. But from my perspective, you know, is this an area, the developer comes in and says he's proposing a subdivision here. Is this an area that we, Dunn County, the PR&D Committee, the full county board, is this an area that we want to see development happen? Does it make sense to have a residential subdivision here versus, you know, putting it out in the country? Or, you know, I guess we have to have a plan in place in my mind. Where do we want to see development happen in this county? And perhaps cluster it in those areas. The other option is, do we want people to be, you know, carving out 3, 4, 5 acre parcels out in the country, chewing up prime farmland? And it's this seesaw back and forth, this teeter-totter, if you will. You know, we have a lack of affordable housing is what we've been told for years in this county, but yet we're hesitant to, you know, cluster developments in areas because we're concerned about the groundwater. And to me, that's the important thing at the rezone. Is this area an area that we want to see developed? And if so, if we rezone this, we have to realize that we could have a dense subdivision here, perhaps with private wells and private sewers. And is that something we feel is appropriate for this area? Yeah.
And right now we can't use that as a criteria, I don't think, can we?
I can comment on that.
Okay.
So part of the rezone process, we do review things like concerns with floodplain and wetlands and things like that. I mean, it is a factor. If we had an area that was prone to this, we do have to review that. We don't necessarily go as extensive as some of these subdivisions do. But if it does come to our attention, I would bring it to, say, Bob or someone in Land and Water to review and kind of give an opinion on. But it is something we've been looking at, just not that detailed.
Okay.
How about soils? Are we looking at soils during the rezone process if it's being proposed to R2?
Not necessarily, but I think mostly because the rezone process isn't, you know, it's not granting permission for a subdivision. I mean, it's just kind of opening the door a little bit.
Right. Good questions.
Just
This
a
stuff
comment,
never
Tom,
ends.
before we move on.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
In comment to what Ann said, if we rezone something R1 to R1 from something else, anything that's permitted in R1 can go there without basically our permission. So if you got 40 acres of R1, you can put a lot of houses in there. And once it's zoned R1, there's nothing we can do about it. And we wouldn't want to do anything about it because we said, yeah, let's rezone it. But the zoning, like we mentioned before, that's the key.
Well,
That's saying, yes, we can.
Go ahead, Ann.
Yes, I just want to say that I feel like zoning it's allowing technically the uses either by permit or not by permit, but it's a multi-level process to put in a subdivision. I mean, just having the zoning is not going to open the doors wide open. Like I said, it's just opening that door a little bit where the subdivision ordinance and other things apply. I mean, it's not the only factor, but it is a big one.
This is a never-ending cycle of trying to make sense and establish the public good while protecting the private interest too. So it's a good discussion. Any other questions or comments?
My only comment is going back to Kathy Stahl and the groundwater. I've heard this from these different subdivisions that we're polluting the groundwater by citing 1 acre lots, with the mound system, all legal. Is it hearsay or is it a fact? For a future subdivision, is there a way to put in a groundwater monitoring well at the downstream side of a subdivision? I mean, it's a stupid idea that the county pays for with whatever fund it's called.
Yeah, we've talked about that, Bob.
So have before and after. Okay, here's the deal. I don't know if we can ask a developer to do that, to fund that. I would say, probably not, or a condition, but maybe that's a stupid idea. It's probably not that simple. But
no, we've talked about that, Bob, and it's not a stupid idea. It needs more discussion and it needs a solution.
All right.
Anything else? Anybody has any questions? Okay. Good discussion. I'm not sure where I think we get a better understanding of the process and maybe of some potential changes that are going to be needed to make the process work better. But for now, that's a good review. Any other business or announcements anyone wants to make? So our next meeting.
Chairman,
Yeah.
I know that the solid waste has been pretty much done away with, but last week I got 2 inquiries about the future of the transfer station. And maybe this question should be to Dave Bartlett, but is that now part of facilities or is that still part of this committee? Because we are the oversight of the solid waste and recycling. Isn't Mr. Bartlett still there?
Well,
Yes, I
Gary,
am. I was trying to get unmuted.
I had the same problem.
Yeah, I believe that was transferred to facilities. Although I may be wrong and maybe it went to highway, but I think it went to facilities. So it would be depending on facilities. My understanding was highway was using that, but I guess I haven't been out there to see what at all.
Okay, so if I get any more calls, then I'll just have them go to Chuck Maves or facilities or highway. Would that be the correct route to go?
We have a highway meeting tomorrow morning and I'll try to remember to ask Dustin how much highway is using that and I can let you know.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Jim.
Jim.
Well, Gary, I might be the guy guilty. I got a call from a person in Eau Claire inquiring about it. So I referred them to you and to Chuck Maves because I didn't know for sure. So I think maybe it would be good information if all those supervisors were because Gary, I'm the guy that maybe caused there to contact you and I gave her your phone number. I hope that's okay.
No, that was okay. And I also got an inquiry from Mark Vinyl, and I think he's the one that's ahead of that 7-mile landfill out there just east of Eau Claire. So for some reason, there's still a lot of interest in the transfer station.
Yes. Yes, I'm hearing it too, and I'm not even on that committee or know anything about it, but Mr. Chairman Bartlett, it might be a kind of a good idea to kind of update the full county board, if I might be so bold.
Yeah, I'm listening to you, and instead of just getting back to Gary, I will ask somebody to give a report on how that's being used at this time. And if it's not being used, I mean, it was kind of a try to see how it can be used, if it could, to save us money in the long run. If you remember, highway, their long range plan was to build buildings out there for cold storage and warm storage. And if this could be used for the cold storage, that would save the county money in the long run. And we'll see how it's working out. This is the first year of using it, and we'll be asking for a report to the county board.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our next meeting is February 22nd. And with that,